and I have with me my colleague, and Jen, will you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Jen Bravo. I am TLA Services Coordinator. And so I'm responsible. So we have different types of contracts and different services. So I'm TLA specific, and James, when he joins, he's Beacon specific. So, but generally we've got an overview of all the organisation, but James will answer anything that's specific to Beacon services that might come up in the conversation. Yeah, and I've been with TLA for a very long time.
As have I, even before Jen. And Jen is my closest colleague, and knows far more about the organisation than I do. So she's invaluable to the close working. I just have to read this. Right. Megan says that she will send you a recording after the meeting. She's recording it, so that'll be good. Okay. So you wanted to know all about TLA, and you sent an amazing amount of really interesting questions. How would you like to? I mean, first of all, if I give an overview of what TLA is, and then we'll look at the interesting questions about our service users, our clients, and go into it that way. I have to say, I have to leave at 2:30, so we'll have plenty of time, I think, to explore it. You asked about the structure of TLA, and first of all, we are a registered charity, and we're a company limited by guarantee, and we report to Charities House. Our government structure, as is laid down by the Charities Commission, is that we have a board of trustees who I am accountable to, and they oversee the governance of the organisation. We meet on a quarterly basis, all the trustees, and each quarter they are given full financial information about our performance, and also full information about our operational matters. They oversee my work through the chair, who I meet on a very regular basis, and they really are my governing body. Underneath that, so that's the supervisory board. Underneath that, we have more regular meetings with those trustees in an executive board, and the executive board focuses in on the financial matters of the organisation. And so the people that attend that go through all the finances every 2 months with a fine-tooth comb and make sure they're all in order. And then, as I said, on an annual basis, we then report to Charities House. So now, who is a trustee? Well, anyone, and I'm smiling when I say this, who has common sense, because when we looked at the skills of our trustee, one of them put forward his opinion that common sense was a vital element to becoming a trustee, and actually it is. So we have this board of trustees. They all have different skills. So some have skills within education, some have skills within the media, with development, with medical, with legal, financial, and if you would like to become a trustee, you come and have an interview with myself and my chair, and then you present yourselves to the full board, and the full board will either say yes or no to that application. And so, yes, it's very interesting. Are there any questions around that governance part?
No, I think that was everything we needed to know for that part. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? One of the things that is important to recognise is that being a charity doesn't mean that we can do anything. We have to work within our articles of memorandum, and so I can't just, we have specific focus on homelessness and the prevention and the support of people who are homeless and need support. That's quite broad because it can be any client group, but my memorandum says that within that very wide spectrum, that's where I have to work. So I couldn't suddenly decide to go and have an organisation that works outside those specific aims within our memorandum. Yeah. Now they are very broad, so it might be surprised you to hear that we have 1, 2, 3. I'm just having to count them. We have 9 different projects that work with 9 slightly different client groups. So we have Carbeck, which is a project which has 6 units that work with women who have issues about alcohol use. We are the only, Jen, we're the only one in England, aren't we?
Yeah, we're still the only service in England that will permit women to drink on the premises. Lots of places they actually can't drink on the premises, but one of the reasons why we did that in terms of Carbeck, which has probably been 20, 23, 24 years, it was about removing some of the issues. So if you think that alcohol is usually a byproduct, for want of a better word, there's lots of underlying issues why women will drink. So we've removed that out of the way so you can get to some of the other issues. So all the women are on a recovery journey of some sort, but that will vary, but we will never say to a woman that she cannot drink and she should give up drinking. That's not the ethos of that scheme, but it is the only one in England of that nature.
And that makes it quite specialist. It's 24-hour, 7 days a week cover. So it's quite an expensive service. Mm-hmm. And it is always fully occupied. And I mean, I would say this, it's the results are quite amazing. We get very, very positive results. Having said that, I do say that we take in women sometimes where their health, because of their previous lifestyle, is shot and very, very bad, and they sometimes die within the service, but their life is greatly improved because of being in that service. But the key to that is that we don't say you can only come in this service if you stop drinking. And in relation to you thinking about your medical lives, and that didn't go well initially with the medical services and the GPs, and we had to prove ourselves. So yes, so that's that. And then we have a service called Our Way Leads. That name was chosen by the young people who actually were on the development program for this service. And Al has 2 core houses, 50 dispersed houses, and we support 100 visiting places. Is that right, Jen?
100, 150.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. It's just it's so it's a big service. Then we have a service in Sustain in Wakefield, which is called Sustain, and that has 238 units. A service called Beacon, which is an emergency service which has 104 dispersed units, and it has 3 intensive support environments, which is what you could think about the old hostel type environment. And so that's 2 for men and 1 for women in the city. We have a street outreach, which is a pilot scheme. We have a housing first scheme, which works with women who sell sex, and we provide houses and then support to work with those women to open their life choices. We have a scheme called Horizons, which and we work with 213 people that are coming out of prison to find accommodation and support. We have an emergency service which is linked with the Leeds City Council, that we just provide a house overnight. And then on top of all of that, we have a social enterprise called Clean Start, which is a cleaning and decorating business where we employ people who have gone through our system, for the want of a better word. So that's how big we are in the city. Right, are there any questions around that?
No, but can I just say that I just think that's absolutely amazing. So when did you begin the charity?
Well, when I first came to the charity, it was very, very small. We just had under 30 staff, and it had been run as a cooperative, and so everybody was equal. And so, for instance, an admin staff, a cleaner and a project worker got the same salary. It was there were no bosses and no hierarchy. And then I came along with a couple of other people, and we were imposed on this arrangement to give structure, and we became officially then a charity, registered charity. And soon after Jen joined. So, and I've been there all this time, and this is how we've grown and developed. You asked in your questions about funding, So now we are far more, the whole of the sector is far more formalised. Our funding comes from mainly from contracts that have been won from Leeds City Council and also Wakefield Council. So that's where the majority of our funding comes from. And then, of course, we have an arrangement housing benefit that there's a percentage of the housing benefit payment that comes to us for some services that we give to our clients. So yeah.
Just
Yeah.
to add to that, sorry to take sense. So TLA has been around in some form since the 1970s. So it was Leeds Cyrenians to begin with, then it was Leeds Housing Concern, wasn't it? That's the most latest, and then Turning Lives Around, we changed our name. Is that 2 or 3 years ago now, Janet?
Yeah, it's 4 years, yeah.
Wow, 4 years, I always get my dates wrong. So as an organisation, in some shape or form, it's been around since the 70s.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's over to you, really. You were asking about things like, do we have volunteers?
Okay.
So Shrestha, I've managed to answer, because we've talked about funding and the legal structure. So I've managed to answer questions 2 and 3. So if you want to start from like 1 and then go to 4.
Yeah, I just wanted to, as you mentioned before, I just wanted to ask about the volunteers. So do you guys accept volunteers? If so, what sort of role do they play in the organisation?
We do accept volunteers, and they have different roles depending on where they are and what they want to do as well, and what their skill levels are. So there are volunteers in Beacon side and there's volunteers in TLA, and I'll talk about specifically around TLA more so. So Sustain has peer and support coordinator. So that was a role that we added to a contract as part of that contract. So they definitely work with volunteers. So the idea is of the volunteers that they'll recruit volunteers external to the organisation, but they'll also recruit internal volunteers. So it's whether our service users or our clients from there. And it's looking at their needs. So some of the range of things they do. So they've got some volunteers that are activity based. So they'll either lead the walking group, the snooker group, arts groups, cooking groups, they'll do that. There's some that provide one-to-one support, befriending support, or they'll do some online support. They manage the Facebook group, and they'll do some telephone support as well. Some will do bits of funding. It's very much what the volunteer wants to get out versus what we need. So in Sustain, it's very specific around, is to give some additional support to the support workers, but it's also to gear our service users up to either participate a bit more fully in the community or get employed. So part of their volunteering service in Sustain, they've just got some funding, and it's about getting people ready for their own businesses. So it's those ones that want to do their own business, whether it be a nail bar, you know, a gardening company. So they do that. So they're very active in there. I talked about befriending, didn't I? So befriending. Sometimes we've had volunteers that do admin stuff. We've got a volunteer that is really, really, really well skilled. And they've got different levels because some of them want to do different things. And so we try and accommodate that. So volunteering helps us, but it also helps the person that wants to give something of their time. So we've got somebody who does huge amounts of work with us in terms of our communications, our newsletters, across the organisation. And so he'll do stuff around that. So it'll be, whether it be organisational newsletters for staff or for client-specific stuff, or he'll do stuff around the handbooks. I'm just making them more accessible, so he'll put graphics in. He's really good at stuff like that, so that ranges. Yeah, so it's very much dependent on what people are coming with and what they need, but yeah, volunteers, we do have them.
I also just wanted to ask what measures are put in place to sort of keep the service users safe?
Okay, so we've got policies and procedures, obviously. So if we follow on from what Janet has said, so we're commissioned by local authority. So we're audited by, in some shape or form, by local authority. So there's certain things that we have to have in place. So we have to have policies, we've got procedures, we've got to adhere for the young people. So we've got some services specifically for young people. So we have to adhere to things like Section 11, the Section 11 so audits, which is about what our policies and procedures are. So what are our policies and procedures? How do we work with young people? How do we keep them safe? So we keep them safe like policies. So we've got policies, we've got procedures. Our staff are trained, we do safer recruitment. So on any panel, there's supposed to be somebody that has been through safer recruitment. And the idea of that is trying to get the right fit for each post. So it's not just about can they do the job, are they suitable? So there's safeguarding of children and there's safeguarding of adults, and there's slightly different things that we need to do. So what we try and do is make sure all the clients, whether they're adults or children, they've got an understanding of what safeguarding is, they've got an understanding of what abuse is and what it looks like, and we give them examples what that might look like. So for a young person, it might be somebody giving you something. They're not giving you something for nothing. They usually want something. And so we try and do that to guard the young people against that. We take part in any of the safeguarding initiatives on days. We do all that. We take part in so training. Staff have to be trained. Safeguarding is core training, whether that be children, young persons, or whether it be adults. Adults, the reason why I say adults are slightly different, because when we're talking about adults, we're talking about capacity as well. So they actually have mental capacity, which you've probably done about or you will do about, so they can make choices. So our decisions in respect to adults are slightly different to our decisions that we have to make in terms of young people and children. We have safeguarding leads across the organisation, so they promote safeguarding initiatives and they give some extra support to staff. What else do? We do take part in serious case reviews and lessons learned. So we try and learn lessons for anything that goes wrong or slightly pear-shaped. We try and incorporate that and change policies and procedures accordingly. And we are kind of moving towards, we've got aspects of this, but we're moving towards trauma-informed practice. So obviously that again is a way of keeping people safe, because it's us as workers understanding the needs of the people that are coming through our service. Janet, have I missed anything? I'm one of the safeguarding, so I can talk forever. So
yeah, I mean, Jenny's our specialist safeguarding lead. You have to remember that our client group are very varied. So, for instance, looking at say, we have clients who use drugs. So in this pandemic and in this, one of the things that has been something we've had to work with is the fact that, first of all, because our clients have been restricted about going out, therefore it's restricted the sales of heroin in actually dealers, and there's been some bad heroin in the city, and our clients have been, some of them have been using more because of the isolation and things that they've been suffering. So we have had to look at keeping them safe, and it's a kind of, it's not straightforward, it's very complex, it's very difficult, but we cover all those eventualities. So it's a varied client base, and our approaches have to be appropriate to each situation.
Thanks, Janet, because you did just pinpoint me the bit that I missed was about risk management, which is huge.
Right.
So when we're talking about safeguarding, we're talking about welfare, but we're also talking the higher end adult protection, child protection. But within that, we're also, which is what Jan just talked about, is risk management. So we have to manage the risk, and we're managing the risk with the individuals. So what we're saying is we have to operate on the least restrictive principle. So the issue that Janet presented with, so we know people use drugs, we know drugs are illegal, but we have to make sure that they can do that safely. So what we'd have to do is work with other agencies to make sure that that use is sustained. So when we were going into lockdown, so Carbeck, for example, we're going into lockdown, the worst possible scenario for some of our women would be for them to just stop drinking just like that. So there was a lot of discussion and a lot of work around sourcing alcohol to make sure there was enough within the scheme so people didn't withdraw. So it's kind of those kind of things. So risk management plays a huge part in keeping people safe. And obviously there's different levels of risk that we work with. We have a high risk register. So the idea of that is, because of the people that we're working with, risk is always there and the level of risk is different, but we have to have a way of staff actually recognizing when risk change, when it goes up, when it goes down. And so we have a high risk register that we operate, and so that we escalate. So where we have concerns, we will escalate those concerns. And what that means for staff is they need to escalate their responses to those things. So if you think for Carbeck, those are women drinking, so they've been drinking for a very long time. They've got health issues. Some of them are very near to death a lot of the time, but they've got to be a way for staff to actually escalate that. We need some additional support for that person, or we need to monitor that situation a little bit more, or they need to get to the doctors and we need to push for that appointment. Because sometimes, I mean, you've talked inequalities and we'll get onto that, but sometimes we might have to push for appointments because they've missed 10, 20 appointments, you know, so sometimes we have to do a work about that. Sometimes we have to push, sometimes we have to get on people's cases. So it's all those kind of things. But those are the kind of ways, you know, and it's prevention for them. So because the other thing as well to remember, some of the people that we're working with do not know what safeguarding is. When you talk to them about safeguarding, they do not know what that is. So you have to make sure that they understand, and we're using language that they know about. And that's very tricky, whether it be adults and we're talking about abuse, domestic abuse. Some people, adult women and men, do not understand what that actually is. So it's all about talking to people, talking to them in a way that they understand, so they know. And it's all the other stuff, the leaflets, the posters, and keeping our staff upskilled all the time.
That's great, thank you.
Wow, that was an answer to a question, wasn't it?
Feel free to, you know, ask any more questions or interject, you know, because we can talk forever.
I think you could understand that we're quite committed and we can go on forever. Yeah.
Can I just follow that up with two really brief questions?
Yeah.
Jen, is that okay?
Yeah.
So my first question to that was, you talked about risk management and all about person-centered care and stuff. So do you do that individually with care plans then?
Support plans, yeah.
So support plans. Yeah,
so each either service user or client, because we use different terms. At Wakefield, they use service users. In Leeds, we use clients. So they'll have an assigned worker, and that worker will do either a support plan or an outcome style in terms of what their goals are, what the risks are, what the issues are. And then the idea is that they're working towards those goals. So everyone that comes in will have some goal that they will want to maintain. And it could be big and it can be small. For some young people, it's about getting them up out of bed. For other people, they want employment. Other people, they want to go back to school. You know, it's varies. So yeah, and that would be covered in a risk support plan that would have a risk management plan to that as well. And it would also have a contingency plan. So what's going to happen if that falls down? And that usually means that if that situation breaks down or the risk escalates to such an extreme extent, which other agencies will be involved. So we work with young people, and a lot of them will have social worker, not all probation officer. So it's how they fit into that plan, how we would work with them if we can't get to where we need to be.
Thank you. And the other really brief question that I had was about, you mentioned something, I didn't catch it. Was it trauma
Informed approach, yeah.
Would you just explain to me what because I've never heard of that before.
No, that's fine. As an organisation, we've made a decision a couple of years ago that we were going to move to trauma-informed care. And what that is, in a nutshell, is recognising a lot of the people that we're working with will have been traumatised at some point in their lives, or they would have had adverse childhood experiences. So the whole idea is that to bring that to the forefront of staff's thinking. And so when they're having interactions with people, when people are kicking off, you know, because they kick off. And sometimes as a staff member, and you're the one that's at the brunt of that, it's very hard to remember that this person has a reason for behaving and responding in that particular way. So the whole idea of trauma-informed is so that we gear ourselves up as an organisation to try and manage those interactions a lot better than we are doing. And there will be elements of it that we're doing already, but as an organisation, we are saying we are becoming trauma-informed. Now, part of that is about our responses as a staff team, but part of that is about how we do our work. So it's how do we make sure that like things like our referral forms and assessment criteria is coming from a strength-based approach and looking at people's abilities as opposed to what you can't do, what went wrong, you know. So we kind of lean to, say we were looking at risk, we would probably say, we wouldn't say this is obvious, but have you been involved in any violence? Have you hurt anybody? You know, rather than thinking about what things they're bringing and what strengths, you know. So sometimes we might say, this person commits suicide. How many times do you commit suicide? They commit suicide, but we won't necessarily say, well, what is it that stops you doing those things? What are the supportive factors in your life? You know, what are the things that go right? And what are your strengths? You know, so it's changing that whole approach. And so we're asking better questions. We're asking less questions. We're more focused, and people are starting at a better place. And it's also about addressing the physicality of some of our buildings, because some of our buildings do not lend itself to work in a way, the environment is not as nice as it can be. So it's helping us with that, address things like the environment, what things look like, what colours we should be using, and how we should, you know, even if we want to put posters on the walls and stuff, what kind of messaging would that look like? So it's kind of looking at that in its whole entire, but it builds on other theories like attachment theory. I don't know if you do that, those kind of things. So that's trauma-informed care.
Okay.
Brilliant, thank you. Nida, I think it's your turn.
So I know that you mentioned that you run different projects, but more specifically, what types of activities do you provide to the service users?
It depends. So like in some places, so if you think Harbeck has got a very high staff ratio to the clients, they can do quite a lot of group work. So they do a lot of activity-based work. So it could be, we could be involved in domestic violence week. But they'll do work-based activity. That could be a collage, that could be knitting, that could be painting, and they will address various issues around that. So they generally use stuff like that. Cooking, some of our clients do a cooking group, and some of the young people, we used to have pre-COVID students from the university coming in to do cooking groups. So they'd be doing cooking groups and all things around the shopping, the measuring, you know, household stuff like that. Snooker activity, we've got walking groups, and anything that they deal with. I mean, sometimes in the young people, they do competitions. They used to, what did they do? Come dine with me competition kind of thing. And that was about, that again was around domestic abuse and national relationships. So they usually do an activity-based stuff. And it's whatever they want and what we can do. Individual stuff, it might be homework. homework clubs we've done before, interview prepping, staff do, various things, gardening groups. Yeah, and also they've also been involved, you know, voice and influence groups. We try and encourage them to be involved in voice and influence groups that are around the city. And everybody has house meetings. If they're in accommodation-based services, they'll have house meetings, and so that'll address whatever's going on in the house. In young people, there's lots of stuff around healthy relationships, how they're going to live together, those kind of things. So they'll do stuff around there, and then the usual Christmas stuff, Christmas meals, getting presents for young people, birthdays. Sometimes we manage various things, Easter eggs. We usually try and get loads of Easter eggs and various things.
Have you done any activities that you didn't find as useful, but then you identified areas to improve?
It's a hard one, that, because sometimes things don't work, but it's not necessarily the activity. It might be the particular group that you've got, and that changes sometimes. And one of the things, it's not an activity as such, but we do, certainly in the young people schemes, we do a lot around sexual health. Now, sometimes they can run a group with a particular group of people, young people, that they cannot run with other people. So it's trying to learn from that, but appreciating people are different. But the home stuff, that's worked very well, and we've had that over a number of years. And I think that was something that we thought wouldn't work, because sometimes we'd only get one young person in and two young people, and sometimes you kind of think, oh well, if we haven't got five, it's not worth running. But we kind of say, even if somebody's going on a regular basis, we try and sustain that. But it's hard to say that. I think it depends on what cohort you've got at a particular time, but we try and do different things.
Yeah, and it's like everything else. We work with individuals, and you work with individuals, so you have that element, and then you have the element of it being the right time. So we all know in our lives that something has been introduced to us, and we've not been ready to receive it in a way that's been positive. And our clients, service users, are no different. So in some of the things that we try, some individuals will take it and will use it in a positive way, and others it isn't actually the right time, or it's the wrong activity. So you've got to leave that element of choice, and then it's how we or one would measure progress. Sometimes you don't see progress immediately, but over time you might see that something has affected that person in a positive way down the line when you were least expecting it. My other colleague James Allen has come and joined us now, so I'll just introduce him quickly. James is a coordinator of one of our big services in TLA, and that's Beacon. And can you just give a little overview of that, James? And then we'll get
very small overview. So yeah, we're commissioned to work with people from multiple disadvantage rather. So you're talking about people with multiple and complex needs. At the minute, generally, that's probably some of the hardest to work with people in the city, to be honest, people who have literally just been rough sleeping. And we do this basically by providing both accommodation and support. And in terms of accommodation, we have 205 dispersed community single tenancies for clients. And we also have what we call free ISEs, which are intensive support environments, which is kind of a fancy way of using the word hostel. But hostel's a bit old-fashioned. We want to genuinely move on from that. We want to move to more of a therapeutic environment. So hopefully our hostels are far more trauma-informed. We provide 24/7 support in there for clients. And we're probably about 4 years now into our contract. We started in 2017. So yeah, and I think we're playing a major role at the minute of moving clients on who are in the current Leeds City Council emergency accommodation at the hotels, and people who are literally living on the streets into our accommodation, and then we link up with independent living, which is the next stage, and a lot of our clients kind of move on to their own Leeds City Council tenancies.
Thank you, James.
Apologies for being late, I was just doing some loan working training.
And just going back to the activities question and just going on from what James is saying, a lot of the people when they come to us are actually in crisis. And so if they're in crisis, they want that crisis need resolving, so they don't have that headspace to do activities. Where some of the services like Carbeck is still the same thing initially, but they stay in longer term, so they're more able to respond to those kind of activities in those group type of environments. So again, it also depends on the nature of the service that a person finds himself in, depending on their need.
Thank you very much. I also wanted to ask, are there any health inequalities that are evident within your service users?
Huge. James, you can start on that one.
Massive. It's
Well, the
interesting.
answer is yes.
Yeah. When we first started with Beacon, we thought there were 4 main needs. Okay, so you've got homelessness, mental health, you've got offending, and substance misuse. And what we quickly realized with Beacon is that this 5th need came along, which was physical health issues. And for some of our clients, you know, you're almost thinking about the train spotting generation. Those people have used intravenous drugs for 10, 20, 30 years. It's taken a massive toll on their bodies. You know, they've literally lost limbs due to their drug use. It's really sad, but they're just one extreme example. So we have loads of clients who have a whole range of physical and health issues. Some of that's about disabilities, and we have a limited number of disabled access properties in Beacon. But this health inequalities is really stark. And I think one of the biggest issues that we see is actually almost a self-neglect with our clients. So they're neglecting their own physical health. So I know the whole world's focus and the whole country's focus is on COVID at the minute, but for our clients, the thing that's most likely to kill them is either drug overdose or some unchecked physical health issue like sepsis or a stroke or something like that. So drugs maintain probably the biggest killer at the minute, but there's loads of other physical health issues that'll come up, and it's massively impacted by clients' self-neglect. And that's because of, you know, where they are, their trauma, their ability to respond to their health issues. But we've had many clients who've got quite serious cancers who are not attending regular appointments. And it's a real support issue now, I think, for our staff members to just try and engage clients in their own health issues. And the results of injecting or drug use is a massive issue, but it's not just related to that. It could be related to all sorts of issues. And interestingly enough, we did a massive risk assessment when COVID first hit. And we were like, let's look at our clients' risk issues and see what they are in relation to the virus. Massive COPD, lung issues, heart issues, previous strokes, all sorts of issues that would put them at high risk from COVID. But actually, it's not really COVID that's become the big issue for them. And the great news is as well for a lot of our clients is they're starting to get the vaccine now because they're such a vulnerable population in terms of health inequalities. Now, I could talk a lot about inequalities generally, because I think they suffer from a whole range of inequalities. And for most of our clients, that starts at a very early age. And if you do any research on adverse childhood experiences, which I would highly recommend, you'll see just actually a lot of our clients have a whole number of these adverse childhood experiences, which lead on to later physical health inequalities. And that can be, for example, abuse in the home. It could be their parents being incarcerated, just a whole number of different issues. So yeah, it's a massive issue, yeah.
As well, that became very apparent was a couple of weeks ago was the reduced life expectancy of certainly, James, your client group and our client group overall. And when you're talking about a life expectancy of late 40s, for our client group, it's very, very stark. And the other thing in terms of what James was saying and the underlying medical issues is sometimes we cannot get past health professionals. So so we could have a client, and it is difficult, who turns up to an appointment drunk, and they will not be seen under any circumstances until they're not drunk. Now, if you have somebody that has alcohol issues, they're pretty much going to be drunk a lot of the time, and it's trying to work with that. Sometimes your window that you're able to work and address a particular issue is very, very small. And so that then impacts on health and access to healthcare, access to primary healthcare, all those things impact. And Janet talked about very earlier on in terms of Carbeck, where we did have a lot of issues from the local GP, was about you guys, all you're doing is encouraging women to drink. You shouldn't be there, and you shouldn't be doing what we're doing. The reality of what we're doing is we are minimizing the adverse impact of health on people that drink. And so over the years, our relationships with the local GPs has been strengthened because they actually recognize the value of the work that we're doing. So for example, the women will get to their appointments, staff will go to the women with their appointments, they will do whatever they can to make sure they haven't been drinking before their appointments. If the woman gives consent, they will go into their appointments, they will discuss issues and all those various things. And we still have women that will subsequently die, but they have been able to do really effective end of life care at Carbeck as well, in conjunction with the health professionals, because we haven't said, right, actually coming to the end of their life, they need to go, it's not appropriate. The staff team said, this is their home, this is appropriate, what do we need to do and how can we be supported to help this? So it is massive, as James says, and I think it's only going to get worse, really. But it's becoming a priority for us. But the reality is there's lots of different issues that we're working with. And so what we always need, we do need healthcare professionals to work with us and remember us in terms of that, any messaging that's happening, any campaigns that's happening, remember the group and the community that we're working with and make sure that they're included in that, because a lot of the times we're having to sort of say, oh, we're over here, let us know what's going on in this area, you know. And so all the screening stuff where we're trying to really build into people's one-to-one support, if we don't know about them, we can't encourage them to go, sort of thing. So it's really important. It's a big area, like James says, it's massive.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, because I guess it must be difficult to prove to GPs, for example, that, I mean, because the work that you're doing is to help people long term, it's difficult to show the positive effects on a short-term basis. Interesting. What other organisations are you linked with, and are these formal? Are these formal arrangements, for example, through the council? So, like you mentioned, Leeds Council.
Well, first of all, I'm just going to hold this up. Can you see that?
Yeah.
These are all the different organisations that we will link up with. But the formal partnerships are now very strengthened, because we do work in some of our schemes in consortium. So for instance, in Beacon, we work with Touchstone, which is another charity foundation, and ourselves. And we work together to bring the best of our specialisms to this specific client group. And that has become, over the years, a specific way that Leeds City Council like to provide new contracts. So when a new contract comes up to work in a particular area, nowadays it's usually asks for a consortium of partners coming together. They are very formal and actually very exciting, because you are working across different organisations. You're bringing together different cultures and philosophies, all to focus on the needs of the client group. And that can be very exciting. It can, of course, as you can imagine, working in that kind of tight partnership way, it can be infuriating, especially if you're like me and you want to get your own way. But we work very well across consortium. So there's that kind of formal partnership. And then, of course, we work very, very closely in a formal relationship with Leeds City Council through the fact that we tender for contracts, and those contracts are managed. They're managed by so James manages the contract for Beacon. He meets regularly with commissioners, as genders with the other services in TLA. And so there's a commissioner and key senior person responsible and they discuss all the issues across the different contracts. They discuss results, the way that what we are achieving and how that contract's going. So, and it's a very tight professional relationship with our commissioners. Is there anything you want to add, Jen?
Yeah, just to say, following on that, so generally each contract you'll have specific partners that you're expected to make links with. So with young people services, it's usually like youth offending team. It'll be alcohol agencies for young people. It will be health partners for young people. But also depending on what the young person comes with, that's who you form some of the informal partners with. So we will partner anybody where we need to. So sometimes it's like, it might be a local youth group that this person's coming with and linked with. It could be school, it could be college, it could be their place of employment. We'll form partnerships with that. It could actually be, and sometimes we do have, they have relatives who form part of their support plan. So so we'll have partnerships with them, and we'll have an agreement in terms of what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, and what we will do and what they do. So partnership and collaborative working is one of our key values. So every scheme is expected to form appropriate partnerships. It could be with church, it could be with any religious institution. So, partnership working is encouraged.
James, have you got anything to add?
No, I just think it's an essential part of modern working, isn't it? Partnership working at the minute. I think future funding's all set around consortiums. It's very unlikely just to be individual organisations these days for big funding. And as Jan said, I think there's kind of almost three layers. There's the grassroots organisations and the faith-based organisations. The next level up, you've got kind of voluntary and third sector. And then above them, you've got commissioners and statutory organisations. And you're expected to work with all of them. And let's face it, there are a lot of benefits in working with different organisations.
Have you got any referrals?
Say that again, Mike. I didn't quite hear that.
Yeah, I said, so you've talked about the types of organisations that you're partnered with, but I'm just wondering, have you got any referral systems as well that you use?
Yes.
Yeah, each scheme will have may have a slightly different referral system. So if we look at a couple, like one of the young people's services, the only people that can refer into those services are local authorities. So that could be housing options team that deal with homelessness, and social care that can refer into those services. Some services, it'll be probation. So we'll have a referral route. There'll be questions that we'll ask. There might be risk information that we need. We'll do that. So like for OWL, the service that Janet was talking about, there's a central, although there's different organisations involved, there's a central referral point, there's a central referral form, and there's a hub. So basically the referral will come into that hub, and then that will go to wherever's assessed as most suitable to meet those needs. So we've all got referral systems. I know, James, because you're talking very much about trying to get us, the city, to a point where there's one referral process, so the person coming in is not asking, always being asked lots of different questions, or the same questions over and over again. we've never quite managed it to go to a single referral process, but there's discussions and talks about that. But everybody's is slightly different. Carbex follows slightly different. So Carbex won't generally have self-referrals, while some of the other services will. It's pure professional referral. They'll do an assessment. They'll come and have a look, because Carbex longer term. So generally people will come and have a look, see what the regime is about, see what it's about, look at the, and then make a decision whether they want to be on the waiting list, something like that. Other services, they're emergency. It's a straightforward basic details, risk issues, health issues in, have you got space? Yeah, they're in, and it varies across the services.
Thank you.
Can I ask, so on your website, you mentioned how you help clients find work, education, and start to play a full part in their community. So how do you actually work towards this? Could you give me some sort of examples?
Some of it is mainly in the one-to-ones. And so you'd start with that process. So for example, part of the support planning process is about community involvement in the community and integration in the community. So we're kind of reducing social isolation. So it's trying to work with an individual, what that means for them. So sometimes you'll have somebody in that will say, right, I want to be a doctor, you know, and it's like, yeah, it's not that you can't do, but where are you now? And so it might be very, like earlier I said, it could be very small things. So sometimes we'll have somebody that really cannot get up. So they're not getting up, they're not going to school. Long term, we know where they want to head, but the reality for the next month, this is about getting them up. So we will do specific things like, we're going to get you up at 8 o'clock. Now that seems really basic, but for some people that is huge. So in order for them to eventually go to university, go to college, we have to do some of those basic things. Sometimes young people are coming in at a particular point in crisis. We've had a lot of young people that come in just before their A-levels. And so it's helping them get that past their A-levels to get to the next stage in terms of where they want to be. Some it's straightforward, they want to go to building college, right? What do you need to do building college? I need to do X, Y, and Z. After building, I want to be a plumber, then you need to do that. So it is looking at where they want to go, but breaking that really, really down into very, very small goals. It could be about talking to some young people about volunteering opportunities, whether they're volunteering with us or with other community events. And as we talked about partnerships, we've got quite a lot of partnerships with like youth groups, and sometimes they're running something, or they might be doing a football campaign or something like that, that we can slot people into with an overall goal of trying to get more involved in activities that work outside. Because it's not in our interest for any of our clients to be solely reliant on us, because they have to move out. So what we try and do is look at as well where they want to live and where the activities and things are happening in around where they live. So it's all those kind of things. But we try and be realistic, but it starts with that individual support plan.
I think in terms of Beacon, sorry, just to cut in there, I think we're in a slightly different position. So if you imagine some of our clients, they come into our service, they may be with us for about 6 to 10 months. They may have spent a year on the streets. You know, they may still be addicted to heroin. They may still have unmet physical health needs, mental health problems, cognitive issues, brain injuries. It's not realistic to expect most of them to gain some sort of employment while they're in Beacon. And I actually see that's more likely to happen once they've moved on out of Beacon, where we generally pass them over to a support service called Engage. So for us, a lot of it's about ambition building, trying to increase their self-esteem, their confidence, trying to do tenancy training. Now, we have different levels of clients at different places, but for a lot of them, and thinking about their long-term recovery journey, I think employment in our service is quite unlikely. So we are looking at that's more of a longer-term goal.
I'm kind of ask, so what is done if the service user is not cooperative in terms of wanting to, you know, be better and improve their lives?
This is a great question.
On the street.
Yeah.
That's a joke, actually. It is. I mean, James, did you want to start? Just
Yeah, the key thing I'd say is, and I think it's important to realise this, it sounds obvious, but nobody grows up wanting to be homeless. No little child thinks, well, when I grow up, I want to be a drug addict. So I think it's really sad a lot of our clients are in the situations they're in. And I think we've got to be really careful when we talk about, because in our service, we talk about non-engagement, they're not engaging. And I think we've got to be really careful about that and put less onus, not just on the client, but also on ourselves. So for me, the question would all be, why? Why are they struggling to engage or cooperate with us? Is that because of, for example, I don't know, drug dependency? Is it a trust issue? So many of our clients have been round and round the homelessness system a lot, what we'd call a revolving door. A lot of them have lost trust. They don't have the choice, and they trust authority figures as well, because they may have been previously let down by authority figures. So that's something we've really got to build that trust up. Some, like I explained, may not have the cognitive ability to necessarily always engage with their support workers. So we have this client in one of our dispersed properties. We've tried 7 or 8 times now to get his emergency electric back on at his home. All have failed. One of the reasons is, he was attacked while he was rough sleeping by somebody with a hammer. He's got severe brain damage, and it's very hard for him to maintain engagement and maintain appointments. So there's a whole number of different reasons, a massive spectrum of why people, don't engage for whatever reason. And I think it falls on us to do it as much as we possibly can to encourage that. But ultimately, I guess, if they really don't and they're really not using the service, we've got an obligation to make sure we do have people in our service who are using the accommodation and are using the support. So very occasionally, if all else has failed, we would expect them to kind of leave our service, or we will have to ask them to leave.
so this comes back to what I was talking about earlier about trauma-informed care, that approach. So what James is talking about. So not ordinarily, a lot of the times you'd kind of go, this person, like James said, is not engaging. They're not needing our service, off they go. Now, what we're trying to do is, so we ask those questions. What is it about what we're doing that means that this person cannot engage? So the idea is that we're looking around that a bit more, because ultimately we don't want them to leave the service until they're ready to move on to the next step. So it is looking at those things differently. And we have to remember choice, but also sometimes people's options, as James said, has been limited. Sometimes people don't know what their choices are, and even basic choices. Some people don't know what those basic choices are. And so it's all those kind of things. And so that's when we was talking about trauma informed, that's what we're trying to get staff to the point of. So it's not an immediate, we've offered you this 10 times, 10 times off you go. It's like, okay, we've offered it 10 times. Is it always the same? Do we need to be doing something different? Do we need somebody else in? Because ultimately we want a successful outcome. But yeah, and it's choice. And remember, and as James said, nobody's actually choosing to use drugs in that way. Nobody's actually choosing to be on the streets, but because of limited options and limited capability as a result of their initial experiences, it means that what they think they can choose from is very small, where the reality is they can choose from lots of things. It's just that they don't know that. And even relationships, the nature of the relationships they have, sometimes people are forming relationships that are very, very unhealthy, but there's a level of security in those unhealthy relationships. So it's also us as workers, rather than saying to somebody, you're in a very unhealthy relationship, get out there now, it's like, what's happening here? What are they getting from that relationship? So it's repositioning ourselves. But ultimately, we do have to protect other clients as well. And sometimes when risks become too much, so sometimes we'll have issues, certainly with the young people, they will assault each other, they will beat each other up, and sometimes you actually have to manage that. Sometimes, so you will have to say, well, actually, the risk is too high for these young people in here, we need you to move somewhere else. We'll try it, and we will always get them somewhere else. So it's not a straightforward, here's the door, off you go. It's let's try and move you somewhere, but we have to look at the needs of the whole client group, not just individuals. So ultimately, when we can't do any more and the risks as such, we would look to accommodate the person elsewhere.
Have you got any more questions?
Yep. So how do you help service users maintain independence and well-being at home?
The same way that we try and maintain our own well-being, that's what we try and do. We try and explain to them why it's important to have healthy well-being, what that looks like, what helps that. Friendships help that, but that's positive friendships help that. Sometimes you have to do away with people about what's positive friendships, what's negative friendships, what things will promote well-being, working, doing something with your time that promotes well-being. You're not going to feel that great if you're in your bed all day. You might think it's lovely for 2 days, but it's not helpful. So it's trying to work with people to say what that looks like, what that looks like for them, and promote that. So in terms of COVID, we've had to promote that a lot amongst our staff team, and we are okay, but we've all been impacted by that. So obviously we prioritize that, and we have to prioritize that for our clients and service users. It's one of the priority areas that we look at in terms of well-being, whether it's physical well-being, mental health well-being. So we do a lot of questioning around that, and we expect to provide a lot of support that, and we link people with groups and stuff like that. What was the other part of your question?
No, that was pretty much
That was
it.
it, Jen. Thank you.
I think a lot of the work we do, thinking about a housing support worker, is aimed at helping clients maintain their tenancy and empowering them to do so. One of the things I think we're looking across the whole of TLA is Tenancy Ready Toolkit, which is a little bit more of a formal, not classroom style, but just more of a formal way of teaching clients about actually how to keep their tenancy, what makes a good neighbour, how you pay your utilities, those sort of things. So I'm quite excited about that. I think looking forward, I think that'll make a real difference with our clients.
Yeah, and it's things like that, for the young people. So they've got to pay a personal charge. It's not full rent. It might be nine quid. So 9 quid is a lot of money when you don't have a lot of money, but it's making sure we will ask for that £9 because you need to pay this £9 while you're in there. And we'll look at your budgeting, we'll look at all the debts that you owe, we'll look at if you owe this dealer this amount of money, you will, but you need to pay us that £9. And why you need to pay us that £9? Because when you move out and you have to pay rent, you have to pay that rent in order to live somewhere. So it's things like that. We do. They've got tenancies or they've got license agreements. They've got rights and they've got responsibilities, and we like to exercise those. Both. You've got rights, but you've also got responsibilities. So we don't kind of think, this poor little Johnny, he doesn't have a lot of money, we're not going to have his. You need to pay money because you live here. So it's all those kind of things, and that that formal approach that James is talking about gets people ready. And we do get a lot of, not a lot, but we do get the occasional challenge about, whether from the people themselves, well, you won't get housing benefit, you don't need my money. And it's like, well, housing benefit pays for X, this doesn't pay for that. So you have to go through those kind of discussions as well, and adhering to their tenancy. No, you can't smoke weed in here because it's illegal, you can't do that. And it's all those kind of discussions that we have to have. And they've got their house rules and handbooks and various things like that, which will all.
Thanks, Jen. Any more questions?
So finally, on my side, the last question: what sort of background do your service users come from?
Huge diversity of background. I think to summarize it, I would say disadvantages is a really good way of summarizing their backgrounds. Demographically, most of the clients in Beacon, I think, are white, mostly male, mostly kind of 25 to 45, something like that in terms of demographics. But we just have a massive diversity of client. I mean, I was on a Zoom call to somebody last week, and they had some lived experience. A client was on it, and he was talking about some of the experiences he'd suffered in Africa. He'd basically fled a civil war within Africa and come over to this country, and now was a part of a supported accommodation service. So it is just a really wide variety of individuals. But very often, like I said, in terms of Beacon, the people come with homelessness, substance misuse, mental health issues, and probably some background of offending at some point.
Yeah, there's a significant amount of our clients that have had adverse childhood experiences. That's without a doubt. But there are a lot of clients that come to services, bereavement, loss, divorce, loss of job, things like that can happen to everybody, can really derail people. So it is really a really wide spectrum of people that come through our services.
Okay.
Sorry, it's my section, but I was also typing, so I'm typing furiously trying to keep up. Right. Are any of you guys logged onto the Google document? Because I'm not going to be able to type and speak at the same time.
I've got the questions open.
Oh, actually, yeah, I think I might be able to do it.
Are you asking for somebody else to type on your behalf?
No, it's all right. I can do it. But if I'm not looking here, then I'm not being rude. All right, I'm just trying to type at the same time. Okay. So Janet, you're leaving at 2:30, aren't you? I
certainly am. Yes.
So there's just there's 5 or 6 questions left, but there's just 2 that I wanted to squeeze in before you left, if that's okay. So the first one was so the input that you've talked about in the community is invaluable. I think I can speak for all of us when I say that that we're all really, really impressed. So with so much uncertainty with the current climate, how is Turning Lives Around going to make its charity model sustainable as we enter another recession?
Yes, when I read that question, I thought, goodness me, yes, how are we going to do that? The thing that I keep focusing on is, firstly, we are essential to the work with the client group that we work with in the city. We've got major contracts, and some of them are quite long. Now, I am, of course, thinking that the council, with their big deficit, will be coming to look for savings, but all of the contracts are really tight financially, and it would be very, very difficult to make any savings within those contracts. So the first step is that we ensure that our services remain absolutely relevant to the needs of the city. We work collaboratively with the commissioners and with the council. We do everything we can to improve services within the restrictions, but we don't just think, oh well, we just can't do that or we can't do this. We look for alternative ways of actually improving services. We have a very, very close ear to what's going on in the city, and especially in the relationship with the third sector, the other charitable bodies in the city. And through them, us coming together in a leadership team, we look at, so for instance, the thing that's very high priority on our thinking at the moment is what we call generous leadership. So it's looking towards how can one charity support another over a period of time in not particularly financial ways, but in resources. How can we look at being more generous rather than competitive in when we are going forward for new tenders? So we're looking at taking a philosophical approach to the situation and a strategic approach, but we're also looking at small bite-sized changes that we can make that will sustain us and create that extra value within the city. And after that, Mike, you know, it's anybody's sort of call. But all of TLA and from our frontline workers to my amazing leadership team. That is in our heads. We are looking for the right opportunities. We are trying very much as an organisation to diverse geographically. So we're trying for new contracts that take us out of Leeds into other areas, so that not all our money comes from one authority. However, that all takes time. But the short answer to that, Mike, is we're on it. We're looking at it. It's in our minds all the time.
I've just got a couple of quick points. I think, Janet, your point about being relevant is absolutely spot on, because we need to maintain that we're relevant to the Leeds City Council, to our main commissioners during this difficult time. And I think we're more relevant than ever, to be honest. I think the other thing, there's been a lot of studies showing that supported accommodation saves the country money. It's a preventative measure. You just look at the cost of prison incarceration for a year, which is about £49,000. Just stopping somebody going to prison, stopping somebody going to A&E, it all saves money. I think it's really important charities like us continue to make that argument.
Yeah, and the other thing that's important is we've discussed about our different partnership working, and it's actually using our partners in a way that helps us both or all, and to the end result for for a good result for our client. So it's that, generosity between all the charities to achieve the very best we can for our client. Then we hold on to that relevance in the city. So, I mean, that's my hope and my aim for the next year, really. Anybody else?
Yeah, sorry, I was just adding one more thing. Right. Okay. So on a more personal note, Nida, this is the last question. On a more personal note, so I'm a care leaver myself, and as I'm sure you know, like many other care leavers, when I left the system, I ended up homeless through no fault of my own. There was no space for me, and I was a rough sleeper for several months, and I've worked from being homeless and living in poverty for a long time to now I'm in one of the best medical schools in the country. So my biggest motivator was often hearing what other people were doing, and in that initial, I remember when I was first taken into care, I felt like there was nobody that I knew that could do the things that I wanted to do, and that life had held me back from doing. So I want to know, do you find that that's the case with your clients or your service users? And how do you champion your success stories?
Well, we do champion our success stories, because it serves a lot of purposes to do that. It helps people see what we can do. It motivates. A success story motivates our staff teams more than anything in the world. And if you get, which we do, a young person coming into our services with multiple needs and has a vision that they want to do this, and you help them and they're successful. So for instance, we have young people that have gone on to university, and we've been looking at resources to buy books for them, get them through. And it's not only motivating for that person, and isn't he being amazing? It then motivates others that they can achieve. But then it has a wider effect on the whole team, on me, and on everybody that's involved. And so that peer success is so very, very important. Mike. It's just if you can show somebody that it can be done and they can actually see that happening, it's such a big motivator in anyone's life, but most particularly for somebody whose life had the journey that you've had. I mean, come back to the organisation and talk to our clients. That would be lovely.
That's am I still on? Yeah, so that's something that I regularly engage with now. So I go back to local authorities back from where I used to live in the care home that I was in. I work with some organisations back home in the northeast as well, and in Leeds. I work with Homeless Street Angels quite regularly now. Yes, I mean that's something that I take a lot of pride in and a lot of pleasure. I mean, I can only really say that I've just made it into medical school. It's been a 10-year journey, but yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't want to diverge, but I'm sure probably what you find is the case when you get your service users out into the real world. The greatest challenges for me, it wasn't the safety issues whilst I was living on the streets. The greatest challenges for me were just the systemic disadvantages I found at every step of the way. Going into college, having to work full time, like that's not acceptable. You can't miss this chemistry lesson. Like getting employment, like getting a house, all those types of things. And I don't know if you found that's been the same with your service users, but quite often I found it's the journey afterwards that is the most difficult part, and it's changing people's perceptions. Like people just think that because you're homeless that you're scum and that you're never going to go anywhere in life, and actually that's not the truth. So I think that's been a big part of my role, and I take a lot of pride in that now. But by going to visit some local authorities.
Well, Mike, I applaud that.
Thank you.
And as I say,
yes, I would love to sit down and speak with you. So,
sorry?
I said, but yes, I would love to sit down and speak with you and see how.
Yes, and I mean, I'll offer that to you all actually, if you ever want to come and oh, please let all of this. I want to be let out back to my office, but if you ever want to come when we can do it in a safe way and visit. You'd be very welcome. And if you want to do this again, that's fine. Now, I know I have to go. In fact, I have to go quite immediately. Was there anything else? And if you want to continue, I'm sure Jen and James will host for a while. And yes,
there was only 3 questions left that I've got to ask, but I can I'm quite happy to ask them to Jen and James. I'm sure we'll do a great job.
Jen and James, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I think we might manage.
That's fine. Yeah. Who's hosting the meeting, Jen? Is it you?
No, I think it's Megan who is not around, and now I'm worried, James. If I press end, will it end the whole of the meeting?
Why don't you see if you can transfer hosting to Jane? See if you're able to do that. No,
yeah, if you press the top 3 buttons in my window, you should be able to make me host if you are in fact host.
I don't think I am, you see. I think Megan, I'm not, because I couldn't record.
So Megan,
wait a minute now. I've got a right. I'm going to, if I say make host, will it be you?
Yeah.
I'm doing it. Hey, I've loved meeting you all, by the way. Let's do it again. Yeah. Right, I'm doing that, James.
I've not seen anything yet that tells me it's happened.
It says, do you want to change the host to James Allen?
Yes.
I'm going to put yes.
Yeah.
You've done it, Janet. Thanks.
Thanks. Well, I'm going now. I'm leaving.
All right, Janet. Thank you.
Remember, if you want to do it again, all of us could go on and on and on. Bye.
Thanks so much for inviting us. Thank you.
Bye.
Catch you later.
Okay. Right. So is it okay if I just continue with the last couple of questions? Is that all right? Yeah.
Yeah, just go for it.
Okay. So do service users ever mention any health inequalities that they believe to be more to be, I don't know how he's put that. Okay, so basically, do service users ever mention any health inequalities that they feel that they've brought them to the situation that they're in, rather than from your perspective, like what's their perspective? So, for example, they didn't receive a good education, so they couldn't find themselves employment.
I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't know whether when you're in that circumstance, you struggle to have that insight. And they tend, I don't think, to blame external issues quite as much as I think maybe they should do, to be honest. I think sometimes they tend to blame themselves more and take on more responsibility than I think is quite right. It's a tricky one. I really don't exactly know the answer to that, Mike. But I think that they tend to be in survival and crisis mode. So I'm not sure they have the ability to really kind of have that insight. But going back to Jen's point about adverse childhood experiences, I think, yeah, they do realise things went awry pretty early in their lives for a lot of these individuals.
The next question is, do you feel the pandemic has changed your outlook on how you deliver your service?
Change that outlook. Well, we had to adapt the way we did it, so yeah, definitely. So if we talk about you're dealing with anxiety levels, huge anxiety levels, both for your staff team and your service users and clients. And so as much as our staff are client facing, and there was a point where they're still concerned and a bit scared about face-to-face stuff. But also we had some of our clients say, don't come here, don't want to see you as well. And so you've had to adapt. So they've had to use text messaging, all those kind of things much more readily than they were before. Video conferencing, for some, that's been successful, some not so much. Telephone, all those kind of things. So the way we deliver support has changed and adapt according to what situation we find ourselves in respect to COVID, where we are in terms of social distancing, where we with the current messages. But it's also different as well, because historically we're used to, with a client, having a key work session. The key work session's an hour long, you know, and you talk about various things. We have to get people where they're at, and sometimes those are like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and so you're having to grab people. And certainly if you're on the phone to somebody, they're not hanging around, they're not having an hour phone call. It's like bam, 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 you know, those kind of things. So I think, yeah, support has had to change. The way it looks like, people still need the support, and they need it even more so than previous. And like, it goes back to some of the conversations that we had in terms of way forward. We are essential. If anything that COVID has told us, we are an essential service. You know, we had to position ourselves, not just for our schemes, but we had to position ourselves to provide staff to the hotels that we're providing and getting homeless people off the streets. So it does look different, it feels different, and we will do face-to-face when there's need to. And for some people, there is definitely a need to, and again, that looks differently because people have got PPE, they've got their masks, there's social distancing. We're still having to do food parcels, those kind of things. It looks different, but it is the same, and some people need that face-to-face. If we've been supporting somebody on the phone, certainly in Wakefield, after a couple of visits, telephone visits, they actually go and do a check. Now that might be from the top of the garden, they've opened the doors, things like that. We're not necessarily going in. For some people, we would be going in. So it looks different, and it's different depending on who you're working with, what their needs are, and which staff member is involved. We've got some staff, you know, bullets fly off them, you know, this is nothing to them, but you've got some that are very, very anxious, and you have to manage that anxiety level as well in order to get good outcomes for our young people. And not just young people, but for everybody across our services. And a lot of other things that we need had closed down at some point. So, you know, you're trying to move people on. Council weren't moving people on. You know, you weren't getting any delivery of any goods. There's no shops to go to and all those kind of things. So some things take longer. But yeah, it's had to look different. And I think what everybody wants to do, we want to take the good parts of what we've learned and carry that on, and leave some of the ones that we don't like to it. But it's had to change, and I think it will change the nature of support for a long time to come, I think. And how we interact with other professionals and how we interact with other professionals to support our client groups, that's changed. James, I don't know if you've got anything to add or if I've missed something.
No, I mean, I'll slightly change the question to, so let's say we clicked our fingers and the virus suddenly disappeared overnight, you know, and we can get out there and start going to pubs and stuff again and clubs and all that sort of stuff. That'd be brilliant. But in terms of our service and our service delivery, I honestly don't think it would change that much. I think we would revert very quickly back to the way we've been doing things. Now, in terms of working with staff and managing the organisation, hopefully we've got some long-lasting changes. Jen mentioned about agile working, the use of technology. I think we really want to incorporate them. But fundamentally, our work is about sitting down with a client face-to-face, reading their body language, being empathetic and supporting them like that. And that isn't going to be massively changed. It's massively affected by the pandemic, but going forward, we want to get back to that. We want to get back to looking a client in the eye, being reasonably close, judging body language, and really helping to support them on a one-to-one basis in their home. Please, virus, go away.
I think we can all relate to that. Last two questions. Do you feel your outlook towards safeguarding and mental health of your staff has changed because of COVID-19? And if so, would you like to keep or develop some of those changes?
I think we've always had an understanding of impact of mental health on our staff. We've had to escalate our responses and we've had to escalate our welfare provisions. So we've not always, so for the last, what, 3-4 years? Is it 3 years we've had an employment assistance program, and part of that is access to counselling and some additional support in order to work, not just for the workers, but also their families. So we've had that in place for a couple of years now. The last year, we've really had to do much more in terms of maintaining staff well-being and morale. So it's also, so at the beginning, very beginning of the first lockdown, we were just going into lockdown and we had a member of staff who committed suicide. And that was because of the stress and the thought of what was coming. They didn't know what was coming and how that impacted. So we had to do a lot of work around that team and showing that team up, because again, how you grieve for somebody is different in these circumstances. How you show your support for each other is different. And, you know, and I always remember one of the team that said, we just want to be in a room together where we can hug each other, and they're all on Zoom, they're on Skype, which is even worse than Zoom. So we've had to be very much more transparent about the impact of this situation on people's mental health. It impacts on everybody, and it's everybody's experience. So we've done quite a lot of work of messaging. Our newsletter, you know, it's COVID dedicated, but it has a lot of stuff around welfare, well-being, looking after yourself, asking people if they're okay, telling people that you're not okay, various things. We've had to promote staff. You know, we've got a lot of staff who are working from home, that ordinary work for teams. Get out, go for a walk, come back. We've had to do all those kinds of things. And it's hard for staff to do that because it's like, that's not my job. You need to do that in order to do your job. And lots of activities. We've had to do lots of Zoom activities and stuff. More so, we've always done elements, but more so and more concentrated in terms of this is about well-being and check-ins. We've had to increase the amount of check-ins, increase the supervisions. So yeah, we've had to do that because it really does impact. It impacts me, it impacts everybody else's ability to manage. But the other thing is what's clear is people's understanding and view of risk is different. And like I said to you, some people, bullets fly off them. Great. And there's some people that are really struggling to get out of bed, and we have to work with that range of workers in order to get people to carry on doing their job successfully. And it's an ongoing basis and it will not stop. Like James said, if the pandemic stopped and virus went away, I think this is something that we will have to continue for a couple of years to come, because again, you know, we talked about trauma, we talk about trauma for clients. This is traumatic for staff. There is no question about it. So we know that there's going to be a lasting impact, but it's very, very high up. But it always has been. What hasn't always been, and again has got overtaken, is physical health needs of our workers. We haven't been that great about acknowledging some of those, which is something that we've got a wellbeing group as well. So they kind of look at the mental health stuff, but also some of the other stuff. So when I talk about physical wellbeing, I'm talking about menopause and the impact that has on workers and how that impacts on their work and their ability to do the job. We're trying to be a bit more aware about those kind of things as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things that changed, kind of altered my thinking a little bit was, you know, we talk a lot about working at home, but I think my thoughts, it's very much shifted to kind of almost people living at work.
Yeah,
and I think that's created additional challenges for us, both in terms of leadership and management.
Yeah.
And in terms of leadership, you know, part of that is about being in schemes, visiting schemes, meeting support workers. And actually, we've been really restricted from doing that. So I think that's led to new challenges for us as a kind of a management and a leadership team. And I think the other thing that teams themselves, if you're thinking about the practitioners, they gain so much support from their colleagues in the office, and suddenly overnight that kind of almost just dissipates. So I think a lot of what Jen's talking about, you know, is trying to overcome that and create that kind of peer support, which has been sadly lacking. You know, we've sent out like wellbeing packages, haven't we, for people, with all sorts of nice goodies in them. We've had loads of fun activities over Zoom. We've had a different approach to supervision and check-in. I know my kind of ambition about what work I'd like to get done in Beacon, I've had to refine that, thinking we've got to expect less of staff at the minute. Some of these new initiatives are just too much for people. We need to just take a hold and understand we're in a crisis pandemic situation and work from there.
Yeah.
But just finally, I think, yeah, there's quite a lot of things we want to keep on with, I think, particularly around the agile, flexible working stuff.
Brilliant, thank you. Last question, and we'll all be really pleased to know. Do you feel the complexity of your safeguarding has increased in response to COVID-19? For example, pressures from local council funding, unemployment and food.
What was that end bit, Mike? Didn't hear that.
Yeah, so the question's about, do you think the complexity of your safeguarding has increased in response to pressures from local council funding, unemployment and food banks because of the pandemic?
I'm not sure what you mean. I'm not sure what you mean there, Mike.
So, like some of your safeguarding issues with your clients, like are they eating, drug use, things like that. Has that have those pressures of like your safeguarding process, has it become more complicated in response to the pandemic?
I think in the aspect that James is talking about, some of the nuances that you would pick up on a face-to-face, you're not necessarily picking up on Zoom or telephone. So it's some of those things that has impacted on that. So because you're not just listening to what somebody's telling you, you're watching them, you're seeing them in their own environment, you're getting a sense of what's there. So you're not going in the environment. So like if I give you an example of, say we've got somebody who's experiencing abuse, and we know that sometimes people will minimize the abuse, they will pretend that, they'll give the impression that they're not within these partnerships. These are where workers would be going into their houses. They'd be like, they're not snooping around, but you'd see evidence whether there's somebody there or not. And those things would impact on your risk assessments and your decision making. You've got workers are not going in there, you know, so some of those clues that you would be picking up on, you're not getting, and you're having to have those straightforward conversations. And it's very easy. It's easier to miss things in a straightforward conversation because you are relying on lots of other clues to build up pictures. So I think in terms of that, there's a difference. Some of those other things we've always had to do. And again, it's, I suppose the dilemma about which creates huge amounts of anxieties for staff is if you've got a drug user who needs to go out and see their dealer, they're not going to stay in there, you know, and observe social distancing. They're not going to, they're going to see their dealer to get their drugs, and they're coming back. And then again, that creates problems, and then they're putting themselves at more risk as well. So I think it's that some of the nuances we miss a little bit. But some of all those kind of things, food parcels, healthy eating, all that kind of stuff, they're all part of the work that we do with our client group. So if anything, well, we've still done all right. We do really well with all fair share and all that kind of stuff. You kind of think because there's such a demand, there might have been a worry that we were left out, but I think they're prioritised. We're prioritised with that. So there's never been any issues, have there, about food or anything, any deliveries or anything like that. I don't think there's been any issues. So we've still got that.
Yeah, I think the one thing that stands out for me is just, you know, we're dealing with a massive, I think, domestic abuse issue that has been made so much worse due to the pandemic. And I'm concerned about the consequences of that, both now and later on in the future. And as Jen said, dealing with abuse issues, whether it's around neglect, self-neglect, children, or domestic abuse, or anything around that, is so much harder and more complicated in this time. It just makes it much more difficult to deal with, and it's much harder to access other agencies because now they're less likely to do any dual work with us or come with us to visit. So, and they've retracted a little bit more, and their service isn't quite as much doing as much outreach. So everything is more complicated. Yeah.
Yeah. And contacting is harder. But there are people that are very innovative. So we know that one of the relatives of a worker is, what is it? Is it a beauty salon she's got or something? So she basically sort of got a way of saying to people that she will contact people if people don't respond to her. She's got a way of contacting people that are at higher risk of abuse. And I thought, well, that's a really good way of doing it. And she's got access to them that we haven't. I'm sorry that I can't really remember what it is, but I remember thinking that's a really good idea. And had this pandemic not arrived, we wouldn't have people thinking like that, thinking slightly differently about how to access, how to make sure people are okay. But yeah, it's challenging.
I think that I know what you're talking about. So I'm sure Boots have literally just started a campaign, and I can't remember the specific phrase, but if you walk into any Boots now and say, "Can I have some milk?" or something, they know to call the police.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's a really good initiative. Okay, yeah, we're all done. Thank you so much for. We've taken up like 2 hours of your time, but it's been really, really useful. So thanks.
Can I just ask, so what is this for? What's the purpose of this?
Yeah, so basically, for one of our modules for year 2, we have to go out and learn about some community work and basically how communities are linked with like primary and secondary care. That's the angle that this part of the module is coming from. So we had to choose an organisation. So we've chosen you because something that sounded really interesting, and now we have to go away and write a report on what we've learned, and then once we're done, we submit that report to the uni because we write it together, and we also send over a copy to you.
Oh, brilliant!
So
it's be exciting. So the idea is that you're coming up with how you could link better with services like ours, that kind of thing. Is that the idea?
No, so it's more just like it's more just kind of more like an assessment really of what the organization does and how it's responded to like the challenges that it faced, like ordinarily as well as now COVID. I think that's I think it's more to just kind of make sure that we're aware of that other organizations are out there and how we can utilize them properly. Because I think you touched on an important issue earlier about GPs being a bit resistant and hesitant, and I think that generally the GMC is going in a much more progressive direction. That's definitely what I've seen in the last 10 years anyway, with the way that they've developed content and stuff. So I think it's more just about making us aware that, you know, everybody's different, and how to be a better practitioner and link ourselves in the wider community, really.
That's good.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing in our line of work much closer links with health organisations than I've ever seen before. And that's particularly the case, I think, for the work on the streets with rough sleeping. I don't know if you've come across Bevan Healthcare, but they're a really interesting organisation who work with rough sleepers. So I definitely recommend checking them out at some point. And just to say good luck to you all. It's really nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, right.
And don't forget Janet's invitation, because that was a genuine invitation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think Barbara, I don't know where Barbara is actually, because I'm sure she wanted to join, but maybe she's busy. I think Barbara will send you over the report once we've submitted it. All right. Thank
you. Nice to meet you all.
And you.
That's the mere inspiration. You're still awake.
Yeah.
Take that forward, James. I was saying that I haven't conducted our meetings from my bed yet, but Samir's given me.
That's the next step.
That's the next step. See ya. Take care.
I see you.
Very much.
Nice to meet you all. See you later.